She didn't mean to listen. She wasn't supposed to hear her name spoken like that. But the moment it slipped through the half-open study door, soft, careless, familiar Saren Ashvale stopped breathing. The tray in her hands trembled slightly, porcelain cups clinking together as voices carried through the dim corridor. And then his voice. Low, amused, unbothered. Her, Alpha Kaler Virsad. A pause. Then a quiet, dismissive chuckle that didn't belong to the man she thought she knew. She's convenient. That's all. The words didn't hit immediately. They settled, sank in, like something slow and irreversible. Inside the room, another voice laughed under their breath. She thinks it's more than that, doesn't she? A longer pause this time. Saren found herself holding onto it, waiting stupidly for something to correct it, for him to say no, for him to deny it. Instead, I never gave her a reason to think that. Something inside her went completely still. Not shattered, not broken, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before something changes forever. The tray slipped in her grip, just slightly, but she caught it before it fell. No one inside noticed. No one came to the door. No one knew she had been standing there, hearing every word that stripped meaning from every glance, every moment, every silence she had once held on to. Saren didn't cry. Not here. Not where dignity still mattered. She turned carefully, her steps light, measured, controlled, as if the world hadn't just shifted beneath her feet, and walked back down the corridor without making a sound. By the time she reached her room, her hands were steady again. By the time she closed the door behind her, her expression had smoothed into something unreadable. And by the time the first tear finally fell, her decision had already been made. Saren had arrived at the Vir territory with nothing. No name that mattered. No family that would claim her. No past anyone cared to ask about. Just another Omega who had survived long enough to stumble into the wrong place and hope it didn't kill her. Kaler had spared her. That alone should have been enough. But he hadn't stopped there. He gave her a room in the inner quarters, closer than most outsiders were ever allowed. Work that didn't break her body. Protection when others tested her boundaries just to see how far they could push before the Alpha intervened. And he did intervene. Every time, a look, a word, a presence that made others step back. It had felt intentional, personal, dangerously close to something she didn't have the right to name. Saren had told herself she understood the difference. Kindness was not affection. Protection was not possession. Attention, especially from an Alpha like Kaler, was never something you mistook for more. And yet, he had made it easy to forget. The way his gaze lingered a second too long. The way his voice lowered when he spoke directly to her. The way the air changed when he stepped too close, like her instincts were trying to tell her something her mind refused to accept. She had never reached for it, never crossed a line. But somewhere along the way, she had started to believe she mattered. That was her mistake. Not his words. Not his laughter, but the quiet, fragile hope she had allowed to exist in the space he created. By midnight, the pack had gone still. By 2, the guards had grown careless in their routines. By 3, Saren had packed everything she owned into a small, worn bag. It wasn't much. A change of clothes, a few coins, a folded piece of cloth she had kept from before she even remembered why it mattered. She stood in the center of the room for a long moment, her gaze sweeping over the space that had once felt like something close to safe. Then she moved. No note, no explanation, because leaving didn't require permission, and dignity didn't beg to be understood. The halls were silent as she passed through them, her steps instinctively avoiding the places that creaked, the turns that exposed too much. She knew this place well, too well. No one stopped her. No one noticed. By the time she reached the outer boundary, the sky was just beginning to lighten dark blue, bleeding slowly into gray. The guard at the post barely spared her a glance. Why would he? She was no one important. Just another Omega moving where she was allowed to move. Saren stepped past the boundary line without hesitation. But the moment she did, something shifted. It was subtle, so faint most wouldn't have noticed. But Saren did. The air felt different, sharper, like it recognized her. Her breath caught slightly as a strange warmth spread through her chest, unfamiliar and unsettling, like something waking up after being buried too long. She paused for just a second, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. Then she kept walking. She didn't look back. Not at the territory. Not at the life she was leaving behind. And definitely not at the Alpha who had never once asked her to stay. Because this time, she wasn't waiting to be seen. She was choosing to disappear. Saren didn't stop walking until the sun rose fully behind her. By then, the territory lines were long gone, replaced by open forest and unfamiliar silence that pressed in from all sides. The world beyond the pack was colder. Not just in temperature, but in presence. No patrols. No structure. No invisible order that kept danger at a distance. Out here, survival wasn't given. It was taken. Her step slowed as exhaustion began to settle into her bones, each breath sharper than the last. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten since the night before, but stopping didn't feel like an option, not yet. Not when the echo of his voice still lingered. She's convenient. Saren tightened her jaw, pushing the memory down before it could take root again. She wouldn't let it follow her. Not out here. Not where she had nothing left to protect except herself. The forest thickened as she moved deeper, shadows stretching between the trees as if trying to pull her off course. Branches caught against her sleeves. Dry leaves cracked beneath her boots, louder than she liked. Too loud. She forced herself to slow down, to listen. That was the first rule outside territory lines. Noise meant attention. And attention meant danger. A distant rustle to her left made her freeze. Her body reacted before her mind did, heart stuttering, breath held, senses sharpening in a way that felt different. Too sharp. She could hear it clearly now. Footsteps. More than one. Circling. Saren's pulse kicked hard as she turned slightly, scanning the trees. Rogues. They didn't bother hiding well. They didn't need to. Not when they knew what she was. Alone. Omega. Easy. A figure stepped out first, lean, watchful, eyes already fixed on her like she had been expected. Well, he drawled, lips curling faintly. That's a long way from safety. Two more emerged behind him. Saren didn't move, didn't speak. Running would be pointless. Fighting would be worse. So she did the only thing she had ever learned to do in moments like this. She stayed still, unthreatening, small. The first rogue took a step closer, his gaze dragging over her with open interest. You lost? Saren shook her head once. No, her voice came out quieter than she intended, but steady. That seemed to amuse him. Then you're stupid, he said lightly. Same difference out here. Another step. Closer now. Too close. Saren braced herself, forcing her breathing to remain even as instinct screamed at her to move. To do something. But what? Before she could answer that, something shifted again. Not outside. Inside. The same strange warmth from earlier flickered to life in her chest, stronger this time, sharper, spreading through her veins like heat that didn't belong to fear. Her breath caught. The rogue paused. Just for a second. His expression changed subtly, but unmistakably. Confusion. What was that? One of the others muttered. Saren felt it too. That shift in the air. Like pressure building in a storm. like something unseen had just taken notice. The first rogue frowned, taking another step forward, slower now, cautious. But he didn't stop. "Doesn't matter," he said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier ease. "Still just an omega." He reached for her. Saren didn't think, didn't plan. The moment his hand came too close, something in her snapped. Not fear, not panic, something else. Her head lifted slightly, eyes locking onto his, and for the first time, she didn't shrink. The warmth surged. Sharp, commanding, alive. The rogue froze. Completely. His hand stopped midair, fingers twitching like they had suddenly forgotten what they were supposed to do. The others went still too. Silence dropped over the clearing, heavy and unnatural. Saren felt her heartbeat pounding, but beneath it, something steadier pulsed in its place. Something stronger. The rogue took a slow step back. What the hell? He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Because whatever he had sensed, he believed it. And for the first time since she had crossed the boundary, Saren wasn't the weakest presence in the space. She didn't understand it, didn't control it, but she felt it. That shift, that difference. And so did they. No one moved for a long moment. Then, without another word, the rogues retreated. One step at a time, careful, uneasy, like they were leaving something behind they didn't fully understand, but had no intention of challenging. Saren stood there long after they disappeared into the trees, her breath unsteady, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. The warmth faded slowly, but not completely. It lingered, quiet, waiting. Her fingers curled inward as she looked down at them, confusion tightening in her chest. That hadn't been fear, hadn't been luck, and it definitely hadn't been weakness. For the first time, Saren wasn't sure who she was anymore. But one thing was certain. She wasn't the same girl who had walked out of Kaler's territory before dawn. And something told her she would never be that girl again. Saren's hands trembled as she traced the edges of the worn trail that led away from Kaler's estate. Every snapped twig, every whisper of wind reminded her of the laughter she'd overheard. It wasn't just words, it was dismissal, something she had internalized far too long. And she wasn't going to let it happen again. The forest stretched around her like a sanctuary, but also a cage of solitude. She had survived worse than hunger and cold, and yet the sting of betrayal was sharper than any physical wound. For the first time, she allowed herself to plan not just escape, but reclamation. When the moon peeked between the trees, a low growl cut through the night. Saren froze, instinct tightening her chest. A shadow shifted, massive, deliberate. Her pulse spiked. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Kaler's voice, gruff, controlled, layered with the authority that could bend fear itself, sent shivers down her spine. She spun, but there was no anger in his expression, only observation. The alpha king of the pack stood at the edge of the clearing, the faint glow of moonlight catching the broad planes of his shoulders, the sharp lines of his jaw. Saren's hands curled into fists. "I didn't come to be found." "I know," he replied softly. "I didn't come to take you back, yet." Something in the way he measured her, careful but intense, made her realize she had never been entirely invisible to him. The laughter from before, the careless dismissal, was now a crack in the wall between them, but Kaler's presence was a promise of something far more dangerous: recognition. "You think you can just leave?" he murmured, stepping closer, "and nothing changes?" Her breath hitched. Every nerve screamed that the power between them was a slow burn, a tension that could ignite without warning. She wanted to resist, to run, but her legs stayed planted. Because beneath the fear, beneath the frustration, she felt it, the first spark of what could be reclaimed, what could be turned into fire. Kaler stopped inches from her. His gaze drilled into hers, searching, demanding. You left because you thought I laughed at you. But I didn't. I saw you. And now, his lips curved, faint, almost predatory. You've made me want to see how far you'll go before you stop running. Saren's chest tightened. She didn't move, but the forest held its breath with her. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying and intoxicating. Leaving had been her choice, but staying, testing him, might just consume her. Saren didn't move. She wanted to, but the forest floor seemed rooted to her feet. Kaler's presence pressed against the air around her, not touching, yet every step he took seemed to close the distance between her body and her restraint. I thought you'd disappear forever, Kaler said, voice low, threaded with an edge she hadn't heard before. It wasn't anger. It was assessment, judgment, desire. I needed to, she whispered, almost to herself. I couldn't be here after what I heard. You think words can undo what I see? Kaler asked, tilting his head, eyes piercing through the dim moonlight. His alpha presence was undeniable, the kind of power that made the air vibrate subtly, yet demanded quiet obedience. You believe leaving means control, but you're mistaken. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She could feel the pull of him, that magnetic force she had ignored for so long. And with each heartbeat, she realized she had been running not from him, but from the way she made him feel, and how he made her feel. Kaler's gaze flicked to the moon, then back, sharp and calculating. You're hiding behind what you think is dignity. But I see the truth. I see your strength, Saren. And I see how much you've endured alone. Saren's lips parted, a shiver crawling along her spine. She wanted to argue, to flee, to claim control. But the truth was inescapable. She had been alone, and yet here he was, alpha and unyielding, waiting not to command, but to see. She began, then stopped. Words failed her, swallowed by the tension coiling between them. Kaler stepped closer, the faint brush of his sleeve against hers sending sparks up her arm. Do you know what it means to be truly seen? He murmured. Not as someone to be protected, but as someone powerful enough to make me stop? The forest held its breath. The night seemed impossibly still, the kind of quiet that sharpened every thought, every pulse. Saren realized with a pang that the very fear that had pushed her away also tethered her to him, drawing her unwillingly, irrevocably into his orbit. He stopped inches from her. His voice dropped, intimate, dangerous. You ran once. I won't let you run again. But I also won't force you. You choose. Saren's eyes locked on his. Her fingers twitched. Every instinct screamed both defiance and surrender. And deep inside, she knew that choosing him, or not, would mark the next chapter of her life. The cabin smelled of pine and fire smoke. Saren hadn't noticed how far Kaler had led her, how carefully he'd guided her through paths she would never have dared alone. Every step carried weight, every glance carried intent. He finally stopped near a window, the moonlight spilling across his sharp features. Saren shivered, not from cold, but from the gravity in his gaze. Do you understand what you're risking? He asked quietly. Being seen like this, being exposed to me, to yourself? She faltered. Words seemed useless. Her chest constricted, emotions tangled with desire, fear, and something she had denied for too long. I don't know. Kaler's lips twitched half smile, half smirk. Then let me show you, he murmured, stepping closer. His presence was suffocating, intoxicating, yet he never touched her without permission. Every inch he closed magnified the tension. Every word he whispered pulled her further out of control. Saren's breath hitched as his hand hovered near her arm, hesitated, then dropped to her lower back. Just a brush, not enough to cross the line, but enough to ignite a fire she could no longer ignore. "You think you're running from me, but you've been running from yourself," Kaler said, low, commanding, yet tender. "And I won't let you anymore." Her body reacted before her mind could. Heat pooled between her thighs, her pulse raced, and yet fear clenched her gut. She wanted to push him away and pull him closer simultaneously. The contradiction was maddening. And then the twist. A shadow moved outside the window. Someone had followed them. A rival pack alpha. Someone who had known Kaler would be distracted the moment Saren appeared. The man's eyes gleamed with calculation, and Saren realized with horror that her curiosity and Kaler's mercy had placed them both in danger. Kaler didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped in front of her, protective, lethal. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice deadly calm. The air shifted, charged with the raw power of an alpha ready to defend, and the rival alpha faltered. The unspoken warning was enough. Saren's heart pounded not just from fear, but from the realization that Kaler's attention, his protection, was absolute. The man she had feared, the one who laughed at her before, had become a wall she didn't want to escape from. "You think I protect because I care?" Kaler murmured, his lips brushing her ear, hot and heavy with intent. "I protect because I see you. And once I see you, I can't let go." Saren's knees weakened. Every instinct screamed surrender, yet pride fought for control. This night, this moment, had changed everything. And she knew, whatever came next, she couldn't run anymore. The rival alpha didn't leave immediately. He lingered at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of the firelight, watching, calculating. Saren felt it, the weight of his gaze, sharp and invasive in a way that made her instincts recoil. It wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. And that terrified her more than anything. Kaler stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between her and the window without even looking back. The movement was subtle but absolute. A barrier. A warning. "You've seen enough," Kaler said calmly. The rival alpha tilted his head, a slow smile forming. "Have I?" His voice carried easily through the night air. "Or have I just seen something very valuable?" Saren's stomach tightened. That word again. Valuable. Convenient. Different words. Same meaning. Her fingers curled at her sides. Kaler didn't react outwardly, but something in the air shifted, heavier now, dangerous in a way that made even Saren's breath feel restricted. "You're standing on my land," Kaler said. "That's the only reason you're still speaking." The man laughed softly, but there was tension behind it now. "Your land doesn't extend as far as you think, Kaler. And whatever she is," his eyes flicked toward Saren again. "She won't stay hidden for long." Something inside Saren stirred again at those words. That same strange heat. But this time, it wasn't defensive. It was aware. The rival alpha took one last look at her, then stepped back into the darkness. "Next time," he added, voice fading, "you might not find her first." And then he was gone. Silence fell. Heavy. Unsettling. Saren didn't realize she had been holding her breath until it finally escaped her in a shaky exhale. Kaler didn't move right away. Didn't speak. The tension in his shoulders remained, controlled but coiled, like something barely restrained beneath the surface. "He knew," Saren said quietly. Kaler finally turned. His gaze landed on her, not sharp this time, but focused. Intent. Yes. The single word settled heavily between them. Saren swallowed. "What does that mean?" A pause. Not hesitation. Consideration. "It means," Kaler said slowly, "that whatever you are isn't something this world will ignore." Saren shook her head faintly. "I'm nothing." The words came automatically. Conditioned. Safe. But Kaler's expression hardened slightly. "Don't say that again." Her breath caught. The tone wasn't harsh. but it wasn't gentle either. It was certain. Kaler stepped closer again, but this time, the tension between them had changed. It wasn't just attraction. It was awareness. "You felt it, didn't you?" he said quietly. "Out there, when they approached you." Saren didn't answer. Didn't need to. He already knew. That wasn't fear, Kaler continued. And it wasn't luck. He stopped just in front of her again, close enough that the heat of him brushed against her skin. "But you're still trying to pretend it didn't happen." Saren's pulse quickened. Because he was right. And because the way he said it, low, steady, almost knowing, made something inside her tighten. "What if I don't want it?" she whispered. Kaler's gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes. "Then you'll fight it," he said. "A beat. And lose." The words weren't cruel. They were inevitable. Saren felt it then. Not fear, not uncertainty, but the undeniable pull of something she didn't understand yet. Something that was beginning to rise whether she accepted it or not. And standing in front of her, Kaler wasn't just watching it happen. He was waiting for it. The attack didn't announce itself. It happened. A violent blur tore through the trees, snapping branches as a massive wolf lunged straight for Saren. She barely had time to react before Kaler moved. His arm locked around her waist, dragging her back as claws ripped through the space where she had been standing a heartbeat earlier. Inside, he ordered. But Saren didn't move, because more were coming. Two shadows broke through the tree line, larger, faster, coordinated. Not desperate rogues. Hunters. "They're not here for territory," Kaler muttered, already shifting, power rolling off him in waves. "They're here for you." The second wolf lunged past him, straight at her. Saren's breath caught, and something inside her answered. Not fear. Not this time. Stop. The word came out low. Quiet. Absolute. The wolf froze midair. Not hesitation. Submission. The forest went still. Even Kaler did. His gaze snapped to her, sharp, disbelieving. And then something darker flickered beneath it. Understanding. The third wolf backed off immediately. Not from Kaler, from her. Silence crashed down around them. Saren felt it again, that heat, that pressure, that pull rising beneath her skin like something waking up that had never been hers to begin with. "What am I?" she whispered. Kaler didn't answer right away, because he wasn't looking at the wolves anymore. He was looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time, and wishing he hadn't. "You shouldn't have left," he said finally. The words weren't soft. They weren't kind. They were dangerous. Saren's chest tightened. "You don't get to say that." "I do now." He stepped closer. Slow, measured, like approaching something powerful enough to turn on him. "You crossed the boundary," Kaler continued, his voice lowering. "And something in you woke up. Another step. Closer. And now they felt it too." Saren's pulse spiked. "Who?" Kaler stopped in front of her. Too close. Too certain. "The ones who will come next," he said. A pause. Then quieter, and they won't hesitate like these ones did. Saren swallowed, her instincts screaming, her body caught between retreat and something far more dangerous. "Then maybe I shouldn't stay with you either." Kaler's eyes darkened. Not anger. Not control. Something far worse. "No," he said. A beat. "You shouldn't." Silence. Then his voice dropped rough, inevitable. "But you will."